In the wake of the recent shooting at Appalachia High School in Georgia, I felt compelled to change things up. I've been covering this case with the intention of making it a Patreon exclusive, but when that tragedy took place, I chose to switch and use this as a general feed episode because it has been closely tied to the recent shooting in Georgia. This week we're going to cover the first case in U.S. history that had the parents of a school shooter charged and convicted of crimes and culpability in the massacre that their son went on. Hello, my name is Lance, and welcome to episode 149 of Gone But Never Forgotten, the Oxford High School shooting. Ethan Robert Crumbley was born on April 28th of 2006 to his parents Jennifer and James Crumbley in Atlantic Beach, Florida. Atlantic Beach is located approximately 15 miles or 20 kilometers east of Jacksonville. Both Jennifer and James worked in business development and marketing when they lived in Florida, and they both had previous criminal records from their time living there from 1995 to 2005 that ranged from driving under the influence to check fraud. When Ethan was in primary school, the family made the move to Issaquah, Washington, and then ultimately moved to Michigan when Ethan was 8 or 9 years old. Neighbors after the massacre said that there were always signs that Ethan was not the product of a good home or of good parenting. One neighbor said that when Ethan was less than 10 years old, his parents would leave him at home alone into the wee hours of the morning, and Ethan did not even have access to a phone if anything happened. The neighbor said that this happened frequently, as Jennifer and James would drive to downtown Lake Orion and frequent the bars there. The neighbor said that it was frequent and disconcerting enough that she had even made an anonymous complaint to the Michigan Child Protective Services Agency because she did not think that it was right. And so it seemed that much of Ethan's childhood went that way. It's rather easy to see that he could have seen his life as a nuisance more than anything, and that his parents did not have or want to have much time for him. As early as March of 2021, investigators have said that Ethan would text his mother and tell her that he was disturbed, and tell her that there were demons and ghosts living inside of their house, and that they were tormenting him. This when he was only 14 years old. It was around this time as well that Ethan started to really branch out into dark and then sick and twisted things. He started to videotape himself torturing animals, and he started to also make Molotov cocktails at home. For those that don't know, a Molotov cocktail is a hand-thrown incendiary weapon that is homemade and shatters on impact, causing fire. Ethan also started to sketch himself committing disturbing acts, including committing a school shooting. He even had joked with a friend about committing a school shooting at their school. I saw it reported also that Ethan had also kept a baby bird's head in a jar at home, and that he had later brought that jar to school, but the story has actually been dispelled, and apparently while the incident did happen, it was not Ethan that brought the bird's head to the school. Regardless, all of these things are things that his parents were at least loosely aware of, and people said that at the time, Ethan was a sad, isolated young man, and that he was obsessed with firearms and violent video games. All of these things were certainly a poisonous mixture, and it has been reported that Ethan's parents did nothing to help him. I want to pause for a moment and make something very clear. If you're listening out there and you have a child at home who you may believe might be disturbed on some level, or they may be gravitating to darker things, do something to help them. It's never too late until it's too late, and frankly, Ethan's parents strike me as parents that I personally saw too often when I worked with younger teens and children. They either believed that there was nothing wrong with their son, or they didn't care enough to try to help him. Neither one of those things is obviously the answer. If you think that ignoring issues is the right course of action, this month's episode should show you that while signs and dark interests are not always a sign of something worse coming, they certainly could be. Your child is not perfect. Please, folks, get your children some help if they need it, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Ethan's life in the fall of 2021 certainly took a bad turn as well. There were triggers aplenty. As often is the case, Ethan had only one true close friend, and investigators revealed that that friend had moved away in October of 2021. And around that same time, the family dog had also passed away. So for a young man who had very little in his life, Ethan lost two of those things in one fell swoop. Ethan, it was said, fell into a very deep depression and isolated himself even further. On November 26th, Black Friday, Jennifer and James Crumbley did perhaps one of, if not the worst thing that a family can do for a depressed, isolated, and angry young man. James took Ethan to a local gun shop and purchased a 9mm Sig Sauer SP 2022 semi-automatic handgun. When Ethan got home from buying the gun with his father, he took it to social media and posted photos, and even his mother was willing to tell the entire world about the new purchase that the family had made. She posted a photo of the gun on social media, and she said that it was Ethan's new Christmas present. On November 29th of 2021, Ethan would then subsequently find himself in trouble at school. On that day, a teacher caught Ethan using his cell phone in class, and he was searching for ammunition. The teacher reported that to the office, and Ethan was called into the office for a meeting. Ethan told the school officials in that meeting in no uncertain terms that his mother had recently taken him to a shooting range in town and that he had learned to load and shoot his gun, and that shooting sports were a bit of a family hobby. School officials were slightly alarmed by all of this and placed a phone call to Jennifer, who did not answer her phone. Rather than calling the school back, Jennifer had a text interaction with her son instead, and she told him, quote, "LOL, I'm not mad at you. You just have to learn not to get caught," unquote. Can I just pause here and say that this is dreadful parenting? Sadly, I have seen this type of parenting in action as well, and I think that parents need to learn that they don't need to and perhaps shouldn't be cool to their kids, at least not in situations like this one. This is utter and clear disregard for authority being shown by Jennifer to her son. Sorry, I didn't plan for this week's episode to be a parenting lecture, but here are some free tips for you. Do not teach your kid that they need to simply be sneakier. Fast forward then to the following day, November 30th. Sadly, a day that Ethan had very planned out. Early in the school day on the 30th, Ethan found himself in a heap of trouble because another teacher had come across violent writings and a violent drawing on Ethan's desk. The imagery was described at a press conference after the fact by prosecutor Karen McDonald. She said it was, quote, a drawing of a semi-automatic handgun pointing at the words, "The thoughts won't stop. Help me," unquote. In another section of the note, there was a drawing of a bullet with the words above the bullet saying, "Blood everywhere," and between the drawing of the gun and the bullet was a drawing of a person who appears to have been shot twice and is bleeding out. Below that figure of the person was a drawing of a laughing emoji, and further down were the words, "My life is useless." And finally, to the right of that were the words, "The world is dead." The teacher astutely took a photograph of that drawing and reported Ethan to the office. Ethan was called then to the guidance counselor's office, and his parents were called into the school this time, and they did attend. It was reported that while they waited for Ethan's parents, there was nothing noted, and that there was no concerns on anyone's part that Ethan would be a threat to himself or to others. When Jennifer and James arrived, they were shown the drawing, or what was left of it, because Ethan had scribbled all over the page to try to conceal what he had drawn and written. School officials would tell Jennifer and James that they must seek out counseling for Ethan within 48 hours of their visit to the school, or the school was going to call Child Protective Services. Then, again, erring on the side of "my kid is fine," Jennifer and James refused to allow the school to send Ethan home for the day, and so, instead, he was tragically sent back to class. By that point, Ethan knew what his plan was. He already had his gun at school, reportedly in his backpack, and he set to his plan. Surveillance footage would show that Ethan entered into a washroom in the school, and when he re-emerged a moment later, he was holding a semi-automatic handgun. As soon as he entered the hallway, he started to fire the gun. The hallway was filled with hundreds of students who were in a transition period, heading from classroom to classroom. At the sound of the gunshots, students started to scramble and run in every direction, and they started to take cover in the closest classrooms and anywhere that they possibly could. Ethan walked methodically down that hallway and shot into classrooms and at anyone who was unable to escape. Thankfully, because of the quick reactions and the decisions made by staff and students at the school, he was unable to gain access to any of the classrooms. Students and staff at Oxford High were trained and had gone through drills on the active shooter drill that is known as ALICE: Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. A voice had come over the intercom into the school almost immediately to let everyone know that there was an active shooter situation inside of the school, and teachers started to lock and barricade doors, windows, and inform students that the situation was in fact real, and this was not a drill. Teachers were able to barricade the doors with a barrier at the base of the door that is called night lock. This had been installed on every door of the school in 2017, 3 years before it did become Michigan law. A night lock is a device that is dropped into place at the base of the door or attaches to the frame, and it prevents the door from being opened from the outside. As we have covered on the show, once an active shooter situation is in progress, a perpetrator generally knows that they have mere moments, mere minutes before they are stopped. And so, being unable to open a door is a significant deterrent. At 12:51 p.m., 911 was flooded with calls, approximately 100 of them, informing them of the shooting and the active shooter, and they immediately sent the police force to the school en masse. Within 3 minutes, the first responders were on the scene, and within 2 to 3 minutes of that, Crumbley was taken into custody unharmed by a deputy that had been assigned to the school as a resource officer, and also an additional deputy. When Crumbley was detained, he still had 7 unused rounds inside of the gun, and he still had 2 more 15-round magazines. It was said that he had surrendered to deputies instantly without incident when he was cornered. The entire shooting had lasted only 5 minutes and had taken place in the southern end of the school. The school was, of course, placed immediately in lockdown, and some of the students were evacuated to nearby Meijer store, and a woman that lived beside the school also helped to shelter some students in her home as well. Authorities conducted 3 sweeps of the school in search of victims, and also to ensure that there were no other shooters, and of course to search for any and all evidence before people traipsed through the school and perhaps destroyed evidence. After the shooting, it was noted that at least 1 video was posted to social media by a student that showed people in a classroom that were hiding while someone in the hall was speaking to them and claiming to be law enforcement. The students in the classroom, though, believed that it was not law enforcement and that it was the shooter that was speaking to them, and so they made the decision to flee the room through windows. Sheriff Bouchard would later confirm that based on surveillance footage at the school, Ethan had not ever knocked on a door, and the person in the hall was not him, but likely a detective who was trying to calm the students inside of the room down. At 1:22 p.m., after the first news report was broadcast about the shooting at the school, it was reported that Jennifer, his mother, had texted Ethan, saying, quote, "Don't do it," unquote. James Crumbley, his father, had called 911 himself to report that a Sig Sauer SP-2022 handgun was missing, and he also told the police that Ethan could be the shooter at Oxford High. And so, if you're hearing about this case for the first time, this is when you certainly start to get angry. These 2 parents who seemed to ignore the fact that their son needed help and seemed to be in denial about his issues and okay with the fact that they had armed him with the knowledge of how to load and shoot guns and literally armed him with a gun, suddenly came to the realization that their son was capable of this type of hell when the reality hit them in the face. All I will say is hold tight. Justice, for the first time in U.S. history, was coming. The school was processed extensively by investigators, and of course video footage from the security cameras inside of the school was absolutely paramount. Officials told reporters that the cameras had showed at least some of the actual shooting, and they said that Ethan had been very intent on killing as many students as possible. They said that that was evident because he had fired through barricaded doors and he had aimed every time for the heads or the chests of every person that he shot at, looking for kill shots, and all of the shots that he had fired at people were also at close range. As part of the investigation, also, investigators were issued and executed a search warrant at the Crumbley home, and they found a lot of evidence there that shows a deeper and darker picture of Ethan's state of mind. Part of the evidence that they collected was a cell phone, also a journal, several long guns, and of course various other items that were seized to aid with the investigation. The cell phone had 2 videos in particular that were of pertinence to the case. Ethan had recorded both videos the night before he had committed this atrocity at his school. In the videos, he spoke about his plans to shoot and kill students the following day at school, being very clear on his intent and his plans. In the journal, investigators found that Ethan had detailed his desire to shoot up the school as well, and he had even stated that he hoped that his school shooting would cause Joe Biden to be impeached. Another show of how self-important some of these killers are, being delusional enough to believe that by taking innocent lives they can make some drastic change to the world that they have disdain for. It was also very clear that Ethan wanted to be memorialized by committing the most murders in his school shooting in the history of Michigan. It was noted that while searching the home, investigators spoke with Jennifer and James, but that would be the last time that they would speak to them until a few days later, which we will get to here shortly. I do want to take a few minutes here to talk about the lives that were taken in this shooting. In the short 5 minutes of time, 4 people lost their lives, all students at the school, and also 8 other people were shot and wounded at the scene, including 1 staff member. Madison Baldwin was 17 years old when her life was tragically taken, and she died at the scene of the tragedy. She was a senior who was very much so looking forward to her graduation and who, quite frankly, had everything in the world going for her. She was a member of the National Honor Society, and she had already received multiple college acceptances, including some offers for full scholarships. She was an incredibly intelligent young woman. Madison was also an artist who loved to draw, loved to read, and loved to write. She is remembered by all as a smart, beautiful, sweet, and loving girl, and she is remembered by her parents, Nicole Beausoleil and Robert Baldwin, and their partners, Jason and Christina. Also her siblings, Peyton, Liam, and Brinley, and of course numerous other friends and family members. Hannah St. Juliana was 14 years old when her life was tragically taken, and she also died at the scene after being shot twice by the shooter. Hannah was a freshman, and she was a beloved sister. Hannah was also a star athlete, playing basketball and volleyball. Hannah is remembered as a brilliant young woman and a kind young woman who never acted out and never had a bad word to say about anyone. She was said to be beautiful both inside and out, and she cared about every person that she ever came into contact with. Hannah is survived by her father Steve and her mother, as well as her sister Raina St. Juliana, and the Curtis family, who were described as her second family. They lived just a few doors down the road, and many friends and family members as well will always remember Hannah for her big, bright, and beautiful smile that lit up the room, and of course for her big heart. Tate Meir was 16 years old, and he tragically was shot when he was reportedly attempting to stop the shooter. When everyone else was running for cover, Tate rushed at the shooter in an attempt to stop him from shooting any other people. He would be taken by a police officer from the school, and he tragically lost his life while en route to the hospital. Nobody was shocked that Tate would attempt to save the lives of others while putting himself in harm's way, because that was how he lived his life. He was selfless, and he cared about everyone around him. Tate was a linebacker and a tight end on the Oxford's football team, and he was a junior. Tate had an absolute zest and love for life, and he enjoyed spending time with his family and friends, and he loved hanging out with his girlfriend Brady and her family as well. Tate absolutely loved being a part of the football and wrestling teams at school. He was a leader both on and off the field. Tate will be remembered for his drive for perfection in every area of his life. It's been said that his work ethic was unmatched, and that his loyalty to his friends and family was also unequaled. Tate always worked hard to earn the trust of others, and he left an everlasting impression on everyone that ever had the privilege of meeting him. Tate's family started the 42 Strong Foundation, an organization that offers peer-to-peer mentorship, and the name is of course a nod to his number, which was 42, that he wore on his football jersey. Tate is remembered by his father Buck, his mother Sherry, and his brothers Trent and Ty, as well as countless friends and family members. Justin Schilling was 17 years old when his life was tragically taken. He was rushed to the hospital, and sadly he succumbed to his injuries in hospital on December 1st. Justin had been shot at point-blank range after he had been ordered to the floor by the shooter. Justin was the co-captain of the school's bowling team, and he also worked at a restaurant called Anita's Kitchen. Justin received excellent grades, and he had run and served on student council in middle school, and even tried to run for school president in high school during his freshman year. Justin played baseball and golfed and loved all sports, whether organized or pickup. Family, though, was the ultimate foundation of his life, and he always made time for them. Justin was also a massive lover of music of any genre. He loved everything from Frank Sinatra to Johnny Cash to Eminem and Tupac. He was a snazzy dresser and just known to be a very classy young man. He's remembered as an exemplary employee, a devoted friend, and an absolute pleasure to be around. He is remembered by his parents Jill and Craig and Linda, as well as his siblings Nathan, Clay, Derek, and Amber, as well as countless other friends and family members. As mentioned, 8 other people were injured as a part of this tragedy, and by the night of November 30th, 3 of them were in critical condition at the hospital. 1 was on a ventilator, and another was in serious condition. 3 victims were in stable condition, and the teacher that was injured was discharged after being treated for a graze wound to their shoulder. The last of the injured would finally be discharged from the hospital on January 17th of 2022, more than a month and a half after the shooting. Ethan would be arraigned on homicide and attempted homicide charges shortly after he was arrested to ensure that he would be kept in continued custody, but initially he was not charged as an adult. On December 1st, though, he was charged with terrorism causing death, first-degree murder, assault with intent to murder, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. This would wind up being the first time in U.S. history that a terrorism charge was filed in relation to a gunfire incident on school grounds. The terrorism charge is provided under Michigan law for an act that is intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. This also ensured that Ethan would be charged as an adult, and the judge, Nancy Karniak, entered a plea of not guilty on Ethan's behalf. Ethan was ordered to be held without a bond, and he was relocated to the Oakland County Jail. Ethan was appointed an attorney by the courts because his parents did not hire a lawyer for him, even though they had hired lawyers to represent themselves. They essentially turned their back on Ethan completely after the shooting. In the midst of the process of getting the case to trial, Ethan's lawyer asked that he would be moved back to the juvenile detention center because Ethan could hear other adults in the Oakland County Jail, which did violate the Michigan statute that said that minors could not be held in adult facilities where they could hear other adults. The request, though, was denied by the judge, but Assistant Prosecutor Mark Keast said that he would personally contact the jail regarding where Ethan was to be held. On January 12th of 2022, a plea of not guilty was entered on Ethan's behalf, and on January 26th, he announced that he was going to plead insanity through court filings that were made by his lawyers. On October 24th of 2022, though, Ethan changed his plea. He changed it to guilty on all charges, and he withdrew his intent to pursue an insanity defense. He also admitted that he had used his own money to purchase the gun, and he also said that the gun was not locked away on the day of the shooting, and that he had free access to it. He said that he had taken the gun from an unlocked container inside of his home, hid it in his backpack, and taken it to school, and then retrieved it in the bathroom. His guilty pleas were to terrorism causing death, 4 counts of first-degree murder, and 19 other charges related to his rampage. On September 29th of 2023, Judge Kwame Rowe ruled that Ethan was eligible for a life sentence without parole. And in that ruling, he said that while he understood that Ethan's youth and difficulties at home were mitigating factors that led to the shooting, those factors did not outweigh the fact that his crimes were serious and egregious, and the fact that he needed to be held responsible for his actions. He said that Ethan was obsessed with violence, and he disclosed that Ethan had even continued to be obsessed with violence while in jail. Ethan had actually accessed violent material online while in jail by using a hacked tablet. Formal sentencing was scheduled for December 8th of 2023, and Ethan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Prior to having his sentence read into court, dozens of survivors and family members of the victims delivered impact statements that took hours to be completed. Nicole Beausoleil, the mother of Madison Baldwin, said that she vividly remembered having to go to see her daughter's lifeless body in a steel room and on a cold gurney. She said that her daughter's fingernails were blue and her hair was smeared with blood. She said that she remembers thinking that that was not her daughter. She said that Madison had been far from lifeless when she was alive. She said that she had to be dragged away screaming at the sight of her daughter's body. She said that Madison was not a statistic, nor was she a victim, and that she will always be remembered by name, a name that was loved unconditionally. Buck Muir, Tate Muir's father, said that his family had spent years navigating their way through a life of complete hell, and that they tried to honor Tate, and he said that he knows that Tate is not very proud of how he was handling anything, but he said that they were all fighting for Tate. He said that their family wanted Ethan to rot in his cell for the rest of his life, and he said that what Ethan had stolen from them was irreplaceable. But he said that they wouldn't allow Ethan to steal from them a life of normalcy. He said that their family would find a way to get through forgiveness, and they would find a way to put good back into the world. Jill Sauvé, Justin Schilling's mom, told Ethan that her son would have been his friend. She said that Ethan had caused terror and pain that day, but he had not destroyed any of them. Craig Schilling, Justin's father, told the court that preparing his statement was the hardest thing that he had ever had to write. He said that there isn't much happiness anymore in the holidays or birthdays or milestones, and he said that those days do not carry the same special feelings that they once had. He said that most days he struggled to get out of bed, and he said that anxiety, stress, sleepless nights, and uncontrolled emotional heartbreak make even the simplest and most normal things difficult. He also said that he no longer enjoys the things that he used to enjoy doing with Justin. Things like golfing, kayaking, bowling, and fishing never felt the same again. He said that instead his life was filled with debilitating pain. He said that Justin could not get a second chance, and neither should Ethan. Steve St. Juliana, Hannah's father, said that Ethan could do absolutely nothing to earn his forgiveness for taking away a beautiful and caring soul who had unlimited potential. He said that Ethan had made his own potential irrelevant. Raina St. Juliana, Hannah's sister, said that she missed thrifting with her sister and taking walks with her. She said that instead of getting to one day speak at Hannah's wedding, she had to speak at her funeral. She also read into court a statement from her mom that said, quote, "Now, in my daily life, whenever I see a pair of sisters, I'm sad. When I see other siblings getting along, I'm sad. When I see other mothers and daughters, I'm sad. When I see other families having a good time, I'm sad. When I see others her age having fun, I'm sad. Every day, every moment, every experience, I think of Hannah, and I'm sad." Unquote. Molly Darnell, the teacher who had been shot that day, said that Ethan did not have the power to destroy who she was. She said that she was the writer of her own story, and she said that life without parole was the proper sentence. She said, quote, "You intended to leave my husband a widower, and my children motherless. There is no forgiveness for you, but I have found that I do not need to forgive you to live a life full of kindness and compassion for both myself and others." Unquote. That sentiment was echoed by many families of the victims and survivors of the shooting as they told Ethan that they had not been broken by his actions. They said that their lives had been changed forever and their days were filled with anguish, guilt, and despair, but he had not broken them. Right before he was sentenced, Ethan apologized to the courtroom, and he said that any sentence that was asked for by victims' families is what should be imposed on him. He said that he was truly sorry, and he said that he was a really bad person. He said that he had done terrible things that nobody should ever do, and he said that he planned to work the rest of his life to be better. Ethan was the first minor to receive an original sentence of life without parole following a Supreme Court ruling in 2012 that stated that sentencing a child to life without parole was excessive for all but the rarest of offenders. After Crumbley turned 18 on April 28th of 2024, he was moved to the Oaks Correctional Facility in Manistee, Michigan. And so, with that, we get to the other historic part of this case. After announcing charges against Ethan, prosecutor Karen McDonald told reporters that her office was also considering and pursuing criminal charges against Jennifer and James Crumbley in connection with the shooting. James and Jennifer would wind up becoming the first American parents to be charged with having responsibility for a mass school shooting that was committed by their child. On December 3rd, 2021, they were charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for their failure to secure the gun that Ethan had used in the shooting. After the charges were announced, an alert was issued soon after because Jennifer and James had left the Oxford Township area, and they had not returned as promised to meet with their attorneys and to turn themselves in. The Oakland County Sheriff's Office, the U.S. Marshals Service, and the Oakland County Fugitive Apprehension Team were all searching for James and Jennifer, whilst their attorneys said that their clients had not fled, but instead that they had left their home and their town for their own safety, in light of death threats and never-ending media. They said that their clients would return and would be arraigned. Jennifer and James then missed their arraignment, and they were considered at large, and they were in the wind. A reporter from CNN would report that Jennifer and James had withdrawn $4,000 from an ATM in Rochester Hills on December 3rd, and they had turned off their cell phones to ensure that they could not be reached nor tracked. Later that day, wanted posters were made up for Jennifer and James, and rewards of $10,000 were announced for information that led to their arrests. Around 11:05 p.m. on December 3rd, police received a tip on their tip line from a business owner who said that they had found the Crumbley's vehicle parked in his Detroit parking lot about 40 miles or 65 kilometers away from Oxford County. The business owner also said that he had for certain seen Jennifer, and when she realized that he recognized her, she had fled the scene very quickly. 20 minutes after the tip came in, police swarmed the area, and they established a perimeter, figuring that the two were still within that area, and they were right. Around 2 a.m. on December 4th, Jennifer and James were taken into custody after being found in a first-floor room of a commercial building that was not far from where their car was found. They were found with 4 burner phones, one of which they had attempted to destroy. They also had 4 gift cards and 10 credit cards, and they also had $6,600 in cash. It was discovered that they had cleaned out Ethan's bank account, and Jennifer had even told a friend that she needed to take care of herself. Ethan's destiny was already sealed. The pair were unarmed but very distressed when they were discovered and arrested. It was said that they appeared to have no intention of surrendering of their own free will. Jennifer and James Crumbley were arraigned on that day, December 4th, and they pled not guilty to the charges, and their bail was set at $500,000 each. They were held at the Oakland County Jail, the same place that Ethan was being held, and they were all placed in isolation, monitored under suicide watch, and not allowed to interact with one another at all. Attorneys for the pair tried to have their bonds lowered, but a judge refused this and said that the two were a significant flight risk and that their charges were too significant to have their bonds lowered. In early 2024, it was deemed that the pair would have separate trials. Jennifer's trial would conclude on February 6, 2024, and James's trial concluded on March 14, 2024. Juries in both cases found Jennifer and James to be guilty on all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. On April 9th of 2024, both were given the maximum sentence of 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. Jennifer is imprisoned at the Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility, and James is imprisoned in the Bellamy Creek Correctional Facility. Ethan had filed an appeal through his attorneys of his life sentence, arguing that new evidence questions whether he understood his guilty plea. The Michigan Appellate Defender Office said that they are filing a motion and requesting the trial court review the new evidence and also grant a new resentencing case, saying that life without parole for a child is inconsiderable. They said that, quote, some of the new evidence includes 7 witnesses who could have discussed Ethan's childhood struggles and his mother's alcohol abuse during pregnancy. The potential impact of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder on Ethan's life, including the social and emotional maturity of a younger child than their chronological age, and an expert witness to properly present information about Ethan and his childhood rather than one who cut and pasted information from other reports and did not understand the indicia for evaluating a life without parole sentence for a child. Interestingly, continuing to refuse to help Ethan in any way, Jennifer and James were asked to release information and reports from their trials that could have spoken to Ethan's home life, and both declined through their attorneys. Jennifer's attorney said that the documents were privileged and confidential and that she would not waive her statutory privilege in order to allow the disclosure of the reports. James's attorney said that the shooter is able-bodied and capable of advising his counsel about his childhood, his parents, and his home environment on his own. As longtime listeners of this show know, I tend to err on the side of believing that in cases like this there needs to be a chance of parole for teenagers that commit crimes, regardless of the crime. I have long argued that Sabrina Zunich, who I covered in episode 105, should be granted a chance at parole at some point before the currently constituted September 2042, because she was clearly groomed. If I feel that way about her case, I have to feel the same way here. If it's true that Ethan's home life caused a lot of the problems that were to come, and if there is significant rehabilitation beyond a reasonable shadow of doubt, he does deserve the opportunity to argue for parole at some point in his life. I know that many people don't agree with that, and in a case like this one, it is more difficult to advocate for, but I feel that I need to be consistent. This was a juvenile at the time that he committed his crimes, and there needs to be some level of hope of parole one day for this young man. When I first started to research this episode, as mentioned off the top, I intended for it to be a patron exclusive, but there is a lot of comparison between this and the very recent Appalachia High School shooting in Georgia. I felt that it should then be placed in the general feed for the podcast so that people can catch up on this case if they are unfamiliar. There are certainly a few similarities. Both gunmen were young teens who ultimately surrendered to police. The guns in both shootings were gifts given to the troubled teens by their parents, and parents in both cases were accused and charged as a part of the fallout of the investigation. The most important thing that I want to end this episode with is this needs to stop. Regardless of how you feel about the words gun control, everyone needs to realize that easy access of guns to children is dangerous and deadly, and there is zero excuse for it. Guns should not be easily grabbed by anyone at any time, and certainly not by minors. Our children are killing other children at alarming rates, and there are many cases where things could have been prevented. I'll save you from a personal beliefs tirade and just say thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope that you and yours are well, and I hope that you are and continue to be safe. Please join the conversation on social media, and please jump over to Patreon and sign up. A new patron-exclusive episode will have dropped in conjunction with this case. When you become a patron, you get access to all past and future exclusive content. Thank you again for supporting the show, and please continue to be better. I'll see you next week.